Focus paper there, The Money Trail. That's about finding, following, and freezing terrorist assets. We're going to go now to the House floor. The House of Representatives is getting in session for morning speeches. Thanks for joining Washington Journal this morning.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 5, 2011, the Chair will now recognize members from the list submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, each party limited to 1 hour, and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and minority whip limited to 5 minutes each. But in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yesterday I joined members of the Pennsylvania State Legislature, gun owners, sportsmen, and the President of the NRA at the Pennsylvania State Capitol in support of our Second Amendment rights. I appreciate their deep belief in freedom and protecting the Second Amendment that guarantees our citizens the right to own and bear arms. Our Second Amendment is this country's original homeland security. Where this right is freely exercised without government infringement, our citizens live in freedom with a deterrent and defense to violent crimes. Sadly, Second Amendment rights are under attack from within. Most recently, the Fast and Furious scandal perpetuated by the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives that approved felonious gun sales, directing thousands of illegally purchased firearms to be smuggled into Mexico as a part of a sting operation. These actions contributed to the death of a U.S. border agent and perpetuate the lie that U.S. gun dealers supply the bulk of guns to criminal elements in Mexico. As elected representatives, it is our duty to respect and defend the freedoms that our Constitution guarantees. Those of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives that engineered this dangerous strategy that took a life and threatens our freedoms must be held accountable. Now yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Woolsey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the successful raid on Osama bin Laden's hideaway 10 days ago came with an important and somewhat ironic reminder. This mission was carried out in Pakistan, where we are not at war and have no troop presence. Meanwhile, next door in Afghanistan, we continue to maintain an enormous military footprint of 100,000 or more troops. We're still there even though Osama bin Laden hasn't been there since he escaped our grasp at Tora Bora nearly 10 years ago, and most of the al-Qaeda leadership fled long ago. The death of bin Laden clearly underscores the folly of our current policy. This is exactly the right moment to rethink our approach to Afghanistan and national security more generally, especially with the President's deadline for reemployment just 50 days from now in July. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, our military leaders don't seem to be rising to the moment. According to yesterday's Wall Street Journal, officers in Afghanistan have drawn up a plan that would withdraw 5,000 troops by July 1st and 5,000 more by the end of this year. Madam Speaker, that's not even close to an adequate response to the demands of the moment. It's not the bold move that was suggested when the July 1st, 2011 drawdown date was first announced. 10,000 fewer troops by the end of the year doesn't even get us to pre-surge levels. We owe it to the American people to do much, much more. They have sacrificed enough. What do we have to show for the 1,500 plus people we've lost and the nearly $7 billion a month we continue to throw at this mission? If anything, we've emboldened the terrorists instead of defeating them. If anything, we've undermined our national security interests instead of advancing them. If anything, we've weakened America instead of strengthening it. Americans see that Osama bin Laden is dead, that the military occupation of Afghanistan isn't accomplishing its goals, that we have urgent priorities right here at home. And they're quite rightly asking, why do we still have boots on the ground in Afghanistan? We also owe it to the men and women who wear those boots to end this war. Our troops have served with honor and valor in Afghanistan. A deeply flawed and morally objectionable policy is not their fault, but they are bearing the untold burden that will not be easily lifted. Earlier this week, USA Today reported on a new military study showing that troop morale is at an all-time low, thanks to the punishing emotional and psychological strain of multiple deployments and intense combat. The percentage of Army soldiers reporting acute stress has nearly tripled since the year 2005. Even if the war ended tomorrow, Madam Speaker, the anxiety and trauma plaguing so many of our troops won't go away anytime soon, if ever. But it's time to let the physical and mental health healing begin. It's time to stop sending our best and our bravest into this grinder. We have asked enough of them. Madam Speaker, I think of no better way to support our troops than to bring them home immediately. With that, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair will receive a message.
Madam Speaker, a message from the Senate. Madam Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has agreed to ESCON Res 16, authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for an event to celebrate the birthday of King Kamehameha, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Hurt,
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, all across Virginia's 5th District, people are suffering from skyrocketing fuel prices. As I have heard from families and small businesses and farmers who are seeing a negative impact on their bottom lines, we need to take action now if we are going to address this serious problem of skyrocketing fuel prices. Instead of supporting policies that will help bring down the cost of gas, the Obama administration continues to actively block and delay domestic energy production, causing more pain at the pump, increasing our dependence on foreign oil, and destroying jobs. You only have to look at our soaring energy costs to see the consequences of these failed policies. Gas prices have doubled under the President's watch and are now hovering around $4 per gallon in Virginia. And as these rising prices continue to directly affect all Central and South Side Virginians and threaten our economic recovery, I believe that we must take action now to address this crisis. Last week, the House passed a bill that would expand American energy production and create jobs by reopening the oil exploration in the Gulf of Mexico and off the coast of Virginia that has been delayed or canceled by the Obama administration. It is estimated that offshore energy development in Virginia, which has bipartisan support, could lead to the production of more than 500 million barrels of oil and 2.5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and create nearly 2,000 jobs for our state. And at a time like this, there is no reason to leave these resources untouched when it will help provide relief to all Americans. This week, we are continuing our work to maximize American energy production by considering 2 bills that will end the White House's de facto moratorium on new American offshore energy production in a safe, responsible, and transparent manner. By reversing the administration's anti-energy policies and tapping into these resources to maximize our domestic energy supply, we will take a significant step towards lowering gas prices, reducing our dependence on foreign oil, and creating thousands of jobs for the Commonwealth and our nation. I urge the support of H.R. 1229 and H.R. 1231 and hope that the Senate and administration will join us in our efforts to move towards achieving true energy independence by approving all 3 energy bills the House of Representatives has considered thus far. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back the rest of his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Altmeyer, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of legislation I introduced to encourage the development of a vital component to the next generation of nuclear reactors that will provide clean domestic energy solutions for all Americans. The Department of Energy initiated the Nuclear Power 2010 program in February 2002 as a joint public-private program to develop advanced reactor technologies and encourage the private sector to build new nuclear power plants in the United States. My legislation, the Nuclear Power 2021 Act, applies the Nuclear Power 2010 model to small modular reactors. Under the bill, Department of Energy would be able to enter into public-private partnerships to design and license 2 small modular reactors by the year 2021. As my colleagues may know, today's traditional larger reactors range from 1,000 to 1,700 megawatts and cost between $5 and $10 billion to construct. In contrast, small modular reactors generate 10 to 300 megawatts and cost about $750 million to construct. These small reactors offer several advantages to large reactors in certain situations, including shorter construction times, increased safety controls, and electricity generation. While large reactors are built on a future generation site, a process that can take up to 5 years, smaller reactors can be manufactured in modular pieces in factories and transported by rail or truck, cutting construction times in half. Small reactors can also be completely manufactured and fueled in a factory. They can be sealed and shipped to the site for power generation, and after use they can be shipped back to the factory for defueling, minimizing the potential spread of nuclear material. Additionally, small modular reactors produce a small nuclear reaction which generates less heat, making them easier to shut down in the event of a malfunction. Another advantage of small modular reactors is that unlike large reactors, they can generate power in any location. While large reactors require millions of gallons of water per day for cooling and must be located near large water sources, small reactors can be water-cooled or air-cooled. This technology could open up new parts of the country to nuclear development, such as the arid West and locations that cannot support larger capacity generation, such as isolated rural areas or regions with smaller grids. Unfortunately, development and deployment of new nuclear reactor technologies can currently take upwards of 2 decades. Time and resources are limited for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to develop the institutional capacity to license new reactor designs, and traditional public-private partnerships are often insufficient to mitigate the business risk of bringing small modular reactors to market. This is why I believe this legislation is crucial for developing this all-American technology that could help us lead the world in electricity, innovation, and generation. I encourage my colleagues to join me in making America more energy independent, creating good-paying American jobs, and working toward the future of clean energy generation by co-sponsoring the Nuclear Power 2021 Act.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm glad to be able to take the floor after the member from Pennsylvania, Mr. Altmaier, talking about energy, because it's something that's on everybody's mind today. He's talking about nuclear energy, and he concluded with the remarks, what can we do to find American-made energy solutions? What can we do to find American energy independence? What can we do to provide good-paying American jobs? Folks, those things are all intertwined. There is not a product that we produce in this country that does not have an energy component to it. We have to have that access to energy in order to have access to jobs, and that's why I'm so proud that in the tail end of last week, the beginning of this week, that's what we're focused on here on the House floor. What can we do to find those domestic energy solutions? There aren't going to be as many folks here, Madam Speaker, as I look around the gallery who might have been alive in the 1970s. Madam Speaker, I think you and I were here then. We remember some of those gas lines. Would you believe that we bring less American oil to market today than we did in 1970? Would you believe it's almost half? We have been blessed in this country with domestic energy resources, the likes of which no other country on the planet can claim. And yet, we seem to be doing everything that we can to keep those resources in the ground and instead send precious American dollars overseas. Often to folks who don't like us and would like to see our demise. Folks, energy independence isn't just a tagline. It's not just about $4 prices at the pump. It's about national security. It's about what is our vision for the future of this country. Is it a vision of dependency upon our enemies overseas, or is it a vision of independence where we're bringing American resources out of the ground with American workers creating American capital? You know, it's not just drill, drill, drill. I'm a big believer. Drill here, drill now. But that's not because we're not sensitive to what's happening in a changing energy environment across this planet. Would you believe, for example, that in this country we use less energy per capita today, fewer BTUs today, than we did just 5 years ago, than we did 10 years ago, than we did 20 years ago, than we did 30 years ago? To say that we need energy independence, to say that national security depends on getting our resources out of the ground is not to say that conservation isn't a part of the model as well. It is. And we're doing it successfully, and we should continue to do it. But we have to get our resources out of the ground. Would you believe that as a percentage of the energy that we use in this country, that petroleum is in decline? Each and every year we use less oil per capita than we used the year before, but that doesn't mean that we don't still need to get American oil out of the ground. In fact, we are importing more oil today than we did just 10 years ago, than we did just 20 years ago. We have the resources here. We know of more oil that's in the ground in America today than we have ever known of before. And yet we choose to send our dollars overseas to import that energy instead. 3 bills we're working on here, Madam Speaker, and you know them well. H.R. 1229, Putting the Gulf of Mexico Back to Work Act. Can you believe, Madam Speaker, that in a time of record high gas prices, that we have the second largest shallow water drilling operation in the country going out of business for lack of work? Lack of work. Oil prices headed back towards historic highs, and American drillers are going out of business for lack of work. And it's not just the company, Madam Speaker. It is each and every one of the American men and women who work on those drill rigs who are out of work because we can't get permits issued out of Washington, D.C. Putting the Gulf of Mexico Back to Work Act, H.R. 1231, reversing President Obama's Offshore Moratorium Act. Folks, we have these resources. We have this national security need. We have men and women who want to go to work to solve that need, and we won't let the permits out of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has not been the solution here. Washington, D.C. has been the problem. Folks, if what you want to say is we're going to pass a bill on this floor that's going to ban automobiles and we just won't use any more gasoline, fair enough. If what you want to say is we're going to pass a bill on this floor that's going to ban plastic and say we're just not going to produce any more, fair enough. If you're going to pass a bill on this floor that says we're not going to produce any more fertilizer in this country, who needs it? Fair enough. But until you do, and I'd vote no on each and every one of those proposals, but until you do, we need American oil, and we need to get it out of the ground, and we need to get it out of the ground now. Madam Speaker, I'm just tremendously grateful for the leadership you've shown in bringing these bills to the floor, and I thank you for the time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I represent the Tennessee 9th Congressional District, which is Memphis. Memphis has been in the news quite a bit this past few weeks, and partly it's been for a bad reason, a flood. The greatest flood since 1937 of the Mississippi River. And it's been a massive flow of water across lands and into our downtown and other areas, and it's affected a lot of people. I've toured the damage. There are at least 1,500 people whose homes have been lost. They're in shelters. They've lost possessions. But the city of Memphis is coming together with a lot of volunteerism to help those people, and the federal government, through FEMA and the Corps of Engineers, are doing all they can to protect property and protect people and offer them shelter and food. And because it's a disaster area, we'll be helping them get back on their feet once again. It's a tragedy for those people and a tragedy for a lot of other people up and down the river. But the fact is the city of Memphis is open and open for business, and most of the city of Memphis is not affected by the flood. Contrary to what you might see on the news, the entire city is not underwater. The business sections, most of the city, are totally dry, and people are going to work, flying Federal Express planes all over the world to deliver packages. International paper and all the businesses that are there are fully operational. And our Memphis Grizzlies are still alive and playing tonight in the NBA Western Finals. And the people of Memphis are filling the FedEx Forum when they play and cheering them on and bringing the city together in the spirit that Memphians have come together for years. The city of Memphis has had problems over the years. A yellow fever epidemic in the 1870s almost destroyed the city, but it didn't. The city came back, and came back even stronger. The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King on the 4th of April, 1968, was an awful moment in our city's history and one we had to overcome. But the city did, and on that site, the Lorraine Motel has been built a great civil rights museum, the National Civil Rights Museum, like a phoenix from the ashes, telling the story of the civil rights movement and the movement out of slavery and out of Jim Crow and to an era where an African American could and has been elected president of these United States. So the city of Memphis and the people have an indomitable spirit. They've come back from problems in the past and will continue to do so. Yesterday, the city of Memphis received great news when President Obama announced that of all the schools that had applied in this nation in the Race to the Top program to be recognized and to be honored by his presence as the commencement speaker at the graduation, that Booker T. Washington High School, a high school created in the 1800s, a Jim Crow school, an African-American school in the 1800s, which has done spectacularly well in academics, increased their graduation rate from the 50s into the 81 percentile, bested the state on algebra scores and other scores of great improvement, and shown innovation, was chosen as the school in the country to have the president come to their graduation. And he will speak at the Booker T. Washington High School graduation next Monday in Memphis. It'll be his first visit to Memphis, and the city of Memphis has looked forward to his visit. I look forward to his visit and encourage the president to come to Memphis, and I hope he'll come more times after that. But for those students and other students who need to have inspiration and hope, particularly at this time when there is a flood and many people have been dispossessed, it's so important that the president be there and give those students hope and encourage them to continue to make good grades and to lift themselves up. Many of the students at Booker T. Washington lived in housing projects, Claiborne Homes, which was recently demolished to make way for a Hope 6 project, the fifth of 6 in the city of Memphis. We've gotten rid of projects but given people private residences or apartments to have a better way of life. Those students saw their homes destroyed, but they've worked hard in their school and stayed at Booker T. Washington High School and will be honored by the president's visit. They, like everybody else in Memphis, cheer for the Memphis Grizzlies. And the Grizzlies cheer towel is one that I bring you today. Believe Memphis. Believe Memphis has carried the Grizzlies, an 8th-seeded team, to the championship games. The city believes. The city is strong. We urge you to come to Memphis, have some ribs, have some music, and enjoy our hospitality. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Chu, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise today in celebration of the 60th anniversary of the 1951 convention related to the status of refugees. The convention was historic in spelling out a set of basic human rights that should be afforded a refugee. It was initially directed toward European refugees in the aftermath of World War II, but was expanded in 1967 to include refugees from all around the world. The UN Convention defines who a refugee is and outlines assistance that refugees should receive. It stipulates that refugees should not be returned to a country where they fear persecution. My district in the San Gabriel Valley of California is home to a large and diverse refugee population who fled persecution from countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. In Los Angeles County, they come from places as far as Iran to El Salvador. Since arriving on our shores, many of the refugees have established themselves as civic leaders, small business owners, and hardworking Americans. Some are working with resettlement agencies to help new refugee populations integrate, settle their families, and restart their lives. The open arms with which our nation welcomes refugees from around the world reaffirms America's commitment to human rights. And on this 60th anniversary, I look forward to continuing the U.S. commitment to human rights through strengthening of our refugee resettlement programs. Thank you.
The gentlewoman yields back the remainder of her time. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Spear, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak again about rape and sexual assault in the military. But first, I want to recognize the role our military played in bringing Osama bin Laden to justice. Taking down the world's most notorious man, someone responsible for the deaths of thousands of innocent Americans, is a tremendous accomplishment. Our nation is so proud of the service of our members of the military. The news about killing Osama bin Laden is another reminder that the military service is one of our nation's highest callings. This is precisely why we cannot, as a country, allow a few bad actors to besmirch the honor of the armed forces. And we certainly cannot condone a system that is designed to protect the perpetrators and punish the survivors. Just as the military sought justice for the victims of September 11th, we must continue to seek justice for those who have served their country only to be raped or sexually assaulted by one of their own. As a reminder, the numbers are staggering. The Department of Defense has said that over 19,000 members of the military were raped or sexually assaulted in 2010. Those are the Department of Defense numbers. And only 13% of them actually report the assaults. I made a pledge to share the victim stories every week until Congress and this administration does something more than offer lip service. I recently set up an email account so survivors could share their stories with me. The address is stopmilitaryrape@mail.house.gov. Again, stopmilitaryrape@mail.house.gov. Today I want to share one of those emails. A servicewoman wrote, "I endured over a year of harassment while stationed at Point Loma, California. My class leader was a fleet returnee that referred to women by a number of derogatory names. He and 2 other men in the class would grope women. They would then publicly grope each other to prove that they were equal opportunity harassers. The class leader also would accuse women of being on the rag, or he would ask us if our vagina hurt. What would happen if one of your colleagues asked you if your vagina hurt? And yet this is largely permitted in uniform. It is permitted with a culture of fear that would rival the prison experience or the tyranny of gang-infested neighborhoods. I reported the behavior, and the class leader was relieved of his duties. He was already on a suspended bus for sexual harassment that he committed while on recruiting duty in his hometown. I then was ostracized for reporting bad behavior. This class leader told all the male students at this training center to make sure that whoever went to sea with me should make me pay. Another petty officer deployed on a mission a month ahead of me, he told the ship that I was a feminist and a lesbian that got someone that was on a suspended bus into more trouble. While stationed aboard that ship, I was groped and harassed by my work center supervisor. When we went to sea, he would send everyone back to their barracks by saying that he and I would finish cleaning up. Then he would rape me. The ship sailed for the Caribbean. We sailed through hurricanes and tropical storms off the coast of Florida. I was put on consecutive watches with this guy, and he raped me most of the time we were on watch together. I did get some reprieve because in high seas he would get seasick. Once he got sick all over me while he was raping me. I tried to report this rape and harassment to my chain of command. My senior chief took me out to the fantail of the ship and told me that the chain of command knew that I was a feminist and a Democrat, and if I said anything more about this, I would just be proving that I wanted to get the rapist in trouble. I attempted suicide, but backed out at the last minute. It still makes no sense. Well, it doesn't make sense. I've received countless emails like this and will continue to share them in the weeks ahead. Again, I invite survivors to tell their stories by writing to stopmilitaryrape@house.gov. During a time of such tremendous pride for our military, we should commit ourselves to removing the stain of rape and sexual assault from the great institution once and for all. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back the remainder of her time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to recognize the Institute for Inclusion in the Legal Profession. Lawyers serve an important role in our society, and yet the legal profession, like many others, is in need of serious improvement in the diversity of its membership. There are a number of individuals and organizations who are working to change that fact, and thanks to their efforts, there has been progress. Yet the legal profession, which above all should stand for fairness and equality, is still a long way from being open and welcoming to all, irrespective of individual characteristics and background. The Institute for Inclusion in the Legal Profession, a new group with a promising approach to diversity and inclusion in the legal profession, was established in Chicago, Illinois in September 2009. The Institute for Inclusion in the Legal Profession is addressing the contrast between the increasingly diverse society in which we live and what certainly appears to be an entrenched lack of diversity and inclusion. The Institute is working to improve diversity and promote inclusion through comprehensive outreach and innovative programs. For example, the Institute asks hard questions and finds the answers to them. Working with legal, judicial, professional, educational, and governmental institutions, the Institute provides programs and tools to promote equity in the legal field. IILP uses a new and in many ways unique approach. Its comprehensive programs include lawyers, judges, and law students to address all facets, all practice settings, and all types of diversity within the legal profession. Beyond working to overcome the barriers facing diverse lawyers, it looks at the pipeline for new legal talent. This aspect is key. By helping diverse students become law students, enter the legal profession, and eventually become successful lawyers and judges, the profession will become more diverse and inclusive. A few examples of the work of the Institute for Inclusion in the Legal Profession include a pledge to the profession where lawyers across the country are being asked to dedicate a minimum of 1 day of service to work with young people to educate them about the legal profession and encourage them to join it. Professionalism in Practice, a program where law students and judges learn from each other about the profession and in doing so about diversity and inclusion. The Business Case for Diversity, a reality or wishful thinking program, a research project that provides the first hard data examining the impact of the business case for diversity and the state of diversity and inclusion in the legal profession, which is an annual report and series of symposia designed to educate the bar about its current state, cutting-edge issues surrounding diversity and inclusion, and the most promising programs, efforts, and initiatives aimed at making entry into and success within the legal profession more accessible to all. The mission and work of the IILP is an important contribution to social justice in the United States. I consider it an honor to recognize the Institute for Inclusion in the Legal Profession and invite all members to join me in recognizing them for the importance of their mission and the great work they are undertaking. I thank you, Madam Speaker, and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the remainder of his time. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes.
We have had a very challenging week, Madam Speaker, and I thank you for the time. It is a time of great patriotism and great respect for the institutions of democracy that this country represents. It is a statement that says that we will not be an offender, but we will be a defender. We'll defend our values. We'll defend our soil. We'll defend the people of the United States. I've served on the Homeland Security Committee as the dust was rising from the site of 9/11. When I traveled to New York, I walked along sidewalks where there were walls of letters and pictures of loved ones who had not been designated as being lost, and people were trying to see if loved ones were in hospitals. I saw the pain. And so the capturing and the demise of Osama bin Laden is the finishing of an era and a story. And we are to commend the President of the United States, the Naval SEALs, the JSOC and intelligence communities, and the United States military and persons around this nation who were part of this great effort. But we live in a different world now. As the facts are unfolding in Pakistan, as evidence has been reviewed by the various tapes, we know that terrorism and Al-Qaeda is an active entity around the world. The United States is not the only target, but we are and will continue to be in the eye of the storm. As we've heard representations from terrorists and to-be leaders and wannabes about what they intend to do to retaliate, it is important for us to be responsible with the resources that we have. And so for over a year, I've introduced H.R. 71, the FAM's augmentation bill, federal air marshals. And I call on today for the administration and the Congress to work together to increase the number of air marshals on domestic flights, in long-distance flights, and to increase the numbers of air marshals traveling on inbound flights to the United States. What more do we need? Over the last couple of days, any series of incidences that have occurred, and thanks to the brave passengers now well aware since 9/11 and flight attendants of whom I have fought consistently to get more training, unarmed, obviously, and many without training, are now being confronted with individuals who are charging now reinforced pilot doors, some going to the exit doors. Over the last 4 days, a series of incidences that no one knows whether or not they will stop. Now, we know that some allegations have been that individuals are suffering from mental challenges, and we understand that. We also know that to date no one had a weapon, and so the Transportation Security Administration is doing its job. But this is happening. That's what air marshals are for, to protect the traveling public, flying more than they've ever flown, paying higher prices for bags and food, and now we expect them not to be safe and secure. It is time now to augment and to pass H.R. 71 and to increase the numbers of air marshals. Now, we have an issue of a deficit and a debt. My question is, as someone would say, are we going to be penny wise and pound foolish? Are we going to not safeguard the American people because there happens to be the mantra on this side of the aisle, Republicans who don't want to spend a dime for anything? Well, my friends, we have to invest in the American public. We've got to be able to build infrastructure, and at the same time, we've got to be responsible spenders. But I will tell you this, I will take spending for national security any day. With bringing home the troops from Afghanistan because that mission is complete, now we must invest in the American people. And I'm angry about this, that we would be so cheap that we would not provide the resources to give us new and additional trained federal air marshals, many of whom come from the United States military, many of these soldiers coming home will make excellent air marshals, many of them coming from the U.S. Marshal Service and other law enforcement services. What is more precious than the mother and father and children and relatives that are traveling to visit loved ones or for business, and they're coming home to the United States, and we are putting them in jeopardy because we do not have the air marshals to protect them against these unknown threats. And so my challenge today is, stop being cheap. Stop being nickel and diming security. Stop not understanding that we have the responsibility to go ahead and secure the American public. Today I call for more air marshals on the nation's airplanes, and I call for it now. H.R. 71 should be passed immediately. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Puerto Rico, Mr. Pierre Luisi, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, the United States stands at a crossroads. Responsible leaders recognize that a bipartisan fiscal strategy must be crafted to reduce deficits. A deal will require courage on the part of its proponents because each revenue raiser and spending cut is bound to trigger opposition. Unless officials can persuade voters that sacrifice and self-restraint now are essential for stability and strength later, a deal will not happen. Even with public buy-in, leaders must be ready to take action despite the political perils and be prepared to place the national interest above their personal interest in re-election. It will not be easy, but it must be done. For officials in Washington who are in search of a comeback story, I suggest the case of Puerto Rico. In January 2009, the U.S. territory stood on the brink of disaster. The new government had inherited a deficit of $3.3 billion. As a percentage of revenue, this was the largest deficit of any U.S. jurisdiction. The new administration was even forced to take a loan to meet its first payroll. Major rating agencies had downgraded Puerto Rico's credit to near junk status. Simply put, the island's economy was about to implode. Leaders in San Juan faced a stark choice. Like their predecessors, they could usher Puerto Rico down this unsustainable path, paralyzed by the fear that tough choices would antagonize voters. Or they could place their responsibility to protect Puerto Rico's future above their desire to preserve their poll numbers. Fortunately for Puerto Rico, the new leadership chose the right course. For 2+ years, Governor Luis Fortuño and the island's legislature have taken decisive action to impose fiscal discipline and create a leaner, more responsive government. They have cut government spending by nearly 20%, sharply reducing the deficit as a percentage of revenue. Indeed, by this metric, the island has moved from last in the nation to a fiscal position that is better than 30 states. The rating agencies have rewarded Puerto Rico's progress, with Moody's giving the island its highest rating in 35 years. To achieve savings, the government cut expenses and political appointments and was compelled to reduce its payroll. In my experience, rational leaders do not lay off workers because they think this will play to their political advantage. To the contrary, few actions are likely to arouse greater public displeasure. After all, work does more than put bread on the family table. It gives men and women dignity and a sense of purpose. But the government of Puerto Rico's actions were absolutely necessary and were taken despite serious political risks. Measures were taken to cushion the blow for those workers who were let go, and layoffs did not include teachers or first responders. And more importantly, the government's actions prevented an economic disaster, which would have resulted in far greater suffering and job loss. It is important to emphasize that these decisions were not partisan. Governor Fortuño is a Republican, and I, as Puerto Rico's only representative in Congress, am a proud Democrat, and I supported his policies. The island legislators who voted to advance this agenda are affiliated with both national parties. And unlike in some states, Puerto Rico's leaders did not politicize ARA or other federal funding, which served as a lifeline for the island. Rather, they have worked to put every dollar to good use. So, for leaders in Washington who say it will be impossible to achieve bipartisanship in the budget debate, the case of Puerto Rico should provide a measure of hope. As it nurses the economy back to health, the Puerto Rico government is also advancing a long-term pro-growth strategy. For example, the government has reduced individual and corporate tax rates and ensured that everyone contributes their fair share, boosted sales of housing and commercial properties through tax and other incentives, and worked to address Puerto Rico's high energy costs and dependence on foreign oil, including through the development of a natural gas pipeline that will create thousands of jobs, lower carbon emissions, and significantly reduce energy bills for individuals and companies on the island. In closing, Puerto Rico's leadership has proven that it is possible to work across party lines to control spending and create growth. I urge my colleagues in this chamber to work in this same spirit and to set aside partisan differences to secure the long-term fiscal health of the country we love. I yield back the balance of my time, Madam Speaker.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
And the House is now in recess. They'll return at noon Eastern for legislative business. They'll wrap up work on a bill